Hey, today we're going to take a look at another section of the layout. This is the main yard, and it's probably the biggest section of the layout. It's about 8 feet long, and it's got about 5 storage tracks, a rip track, and a caboose track. It's probably a lot bigger than I had planned, but the more rolling stock I got, the more I thought I would need more storage. So that's what happened. So we're going to take a look at all of this up close in some surrounding areas. Before we get started, please hit subscribe down below so we can notify you when we make a new video. So let's take a look at this. So let's start at this end. This is the rip track section. Originally this was going to be the engine house, which I'll bring over just to show you what a mistake it would have been. Originally this was going to be here, which is all well and good, but there's no room for any details in the front here. It's just this big wall you're confronted with, and it blocks all the views this way. Which I didn't want. So I switched that and put the engine house in the back here, which we'll take a look in a second. So this is going to be a rip track area, which is a repair in place for freight cars. And if you might recognize these two small structures. These are two recent kit of the months. This is a tool shed and another kind of utility shed. And eventually there'll be a section here for wheels and trucks with a gantry crane, so you can pick up the wheels and bring them onto the track and lift up a car and change a wheel. And of course, this is a great opportunity for tons of details. Every detail you can think of: welding tanks, tools, compressors, all that kind of stuff that you need to repair freight cars. This is just poured plaster. I made a little framework around the area and filled in the track. So this kind of scene right here, there's not much going on, but it's my favorite kind of scene because it's only 1.5 inches deep. Yet there's a little story going on with, there's some rusting rail here, some spare rail, some details, barrels, some ties, a pallet. And it's nice because it's something you could do in a short amount of time, but it completes the scene very much. It gives the place a sense of scale immediately with the size of a barrel and so forth. So if you have a little small section, there's always room to super detail those areas. So this is about the midpoint of the yard. And the first track out here is a track that gets us to the rip track. There's, maybe 3/4 of an inch here on the track, yet I was able to get in a couple of barrels and a tire, and it's just a nice little finish to the edge here. You can see this is plywood, which is different from the rest of the layout, which has got a fascia board. This was a kind of a last-minute addition, so I had to extend this, which meant the track was hanging out over the layout. So I just kind of screwed a piece of plywood in here. You can see some holes. I countersunk the screws, but it just gave me enough to get this track here. And now I could probably put a little shed here and more tools and just make a nice little scene here. So this is the revised engine house section here. And again, I framed out an area about 1/4 inch high and filled it with plaster to get the concrete slab that everything sits on. And now I'll have an opportunity here for tons of detail. There'll probably be a little addition that comes out here for a little machine shop and some signage and all that sort of thing. And there's another little utility building that'll go here, and more details, tons of details, which is exactly what I want to do for this kind of scene. And then we have all our storage tracks in front of it. So behind the tracks here, there was some space. It starts about 8 inches where that engine house is, and gets wide to about 12 inches. But it was enough room to add some structures, which I wanted to do. I didn't want it to be all track because it would just be flat all the way to the back wall. So I've raised this up on a piece of plywood. It's about 3/4 of an inch, so I could put a concrete wall here eventually with more details and graffiti. I'm not sure about this building going here. This is one of our kits, Wiley Roofing. I was going to cut this out and drop it in place, but I think it's too short. I might want some height here, something a little bigger so it's not so flat. But we'll see how that looks. I'll mock something up first before I go and do that, or before I even cut a hole in the layout to do that. And then over here, there's going to be a kind of a street section here. The street's going to go to the back and then go behind this structure here. And I've left this section open so I could reach a turnout that's manual back here. So this is almost the end of the yard here. These two tracks come to an end right here. There's some bumpers I need to glue in place here. I'll get this guy out of the way so we can see better. So this is that plywood section, which will have a street and some structures going down there. And I've got a ramp that will take us down to track level here. So I just kind of graded this up to meet the 3/4 inch plywood. And this is the Sunnyside Grill kit. And by the way, the Sunnyside Grill name comes from the fact that this is part of Sunnyside Yard in Queens. Sunnyside Yard in Queens was built by the Pennsylvania Railroad in the early 1900s to serve Penn Station. And while the Pennsylvania Railroad Yard is way too big to model for us here, there's a small little yard at the end of the Sunnyside Yard called the Arch Street Yard. So that's what we're going to call this, because it's a little bit more believable that it's only a few tracks wide. And after these tracks, this would lead to tunnels that went under the East River so you can get to Penn Station. So this is one of the few complete scenes on the layout. Again, this is where those first two track ends. Then it passes by in one track, and there's a switch behind here so we could do a runaround and get the engine back. So since we're modeling the 1970s here, it wouldn't be the 70s, of course, without all this pollution and stuff, as well as a billboard trying to fight pollution. We all remember the crying Native American Indian in those ads, so we had to include that to make a sort of a little sign of the times and to help sell our whole theme of the 70s here. So I'm still on the fence about how big these buildings should be here. I definitely want a street scene. I want another opportunity to do a bunch of details in a New York 70s kind of way. So I need something with some sidewalk and commercial buildings and maybe some industrial buildings. I'm just not sure how far to go. So I keep moving these guys around until I get the right amount of building, the right amount of mass. Because it does make a difference. Like I said, I do need this open here to get to some turnouts that I need to switch manually. And I'm definitely going to do some kind of concrete wall here with a railing. There'll be graffiti here. I did contemplate making this a little taller, but that would keep me from reaching the back even more. So the other opportunity, of course, was to just keep making more track, but that gets kind of boring. I needed some street scenes. Another option is I might do a bridge here that spans over this whole yard, but I think that might be too busy, so we'll see. But the mock-ups really help. I use them so much, and it makes such a difference, whether it's the layout or planning kits. I think I should just lay in the streets and then just do one building, do the next, and do the next, and just kind of see what happens. You can always change it if it doesn't work, right? So we can take a look under the yard here. In this section of the layout, there's a scenery cart. It's kind of getting a little too full. Probably need to make another one, but it holds a lot of good stuff. Ballast, scenery material, static grass, you name it, it's all in here. So that's pretty much the yard for the layout. Next time we'll take a look further down where there's a waterfront section, and we'll work our way towards the back around to the other side here. I also want to let you know that we do have a Patreon page now where you can get exclusive content, more photos and videos of stuff about the layout, the kits, of things that we don't post anywhere else on social media. And I want to thank the hundreds of thousands of people who have, well, thanks to these guys for signing up. Thank you. we'll see what Patreon does. We'll try to make it grow. We'll put more content out there. Take a look if you're interested. Thanks.